Turn with me to the book of Song of Solomon, Song of Songs. Keeping romance in the marriage. I think it might be better entitled today, in this time and period, putting romance back into the marriage. Falling back in love with one another again. How do you do that? And as we study that, we're going to be seeing the same principles about how to fall back in love with Jesus. Because God builds into the home the principles of salvation and heaven and Father and Jesus and how to live. And so as we study this today, how to put romance back into the marriage, how to fall back in love with each other, we're actually studying how to fall back in love with Christ. How to put the excitement and the joy and the peace back into everything. Okay, would you put up on the board for me Proverbs 17:22? I think this is going to be the theme of what God is talking about. A merry heart doeth good like a medicine, but a broken spirit dries the bones. Now, what we need is joy. What we need are merry hearts. And as we study this, we're going to find out how to do this. What we need, according to the Bible, God says this: rejoice in the Lord. Always. Rejoice in the Lord. Always. And again, I say, rejoice. And so what we're going to be studying today is how to do this in the marriage. But as we study how to do this in the marriage, what you need to understand is this is the same exact principles of how to do it with God. So as we're studying this, we're also studying this. One of the things that we need to know in the Bible, and we're going to do a Bible study today, okay? I think it should be fun. I think we're going to learn a lot of stuff. One of the things we're going to learn in the Bible is the very building blocks of society, the very building blocks of Christianity, the very building blocks of the church is the home. And if the home has love and joy and peace in it, that's going to spill over into everything else. And so as we study this, we need to know how to rejoice in the Lord, rejoice in your spouse, and again I say rejoice, enjoy your spouse, and again I say enjoy. Martin Luther said it this way: a man needs to meditate on God 24 hours a day, and also his wife. Okay, wives, we're going to change that up just a little bit. A woman needs to know how to meditate on God 24 hours a day, and also her husband, because the very building blocks of Christianity are the home. So what we're going to study today, I think it's going to be fun. There was at the Cove, you go in and you eat these wonderful, marvelous meals that'll make you fat in 1 week. By the way, I heard that the pastors here are getting better looking every week. And Jimmy, I want you to know I'm back. Sorry, guys. There was this older couple. No, they were old. They were old. There was this old couple there, and they had just gotten married, and they were on their honeymoon at the Cove. I wish you could have seen them. They were so much in love, and it was just exciting and fun to be around them as they renewed their love in marriage. Okay, I got to tell you one more story. It has nothing to do with anything, but it goes with this. Years ago in our church, there was a little old pastor. He was 90 years old. He always sat on the front row, and he had a pocket full of candy for the kids. And the kids knew that, and they would all flock down every Sunday, and he'd pass out candy. He was gone 1 week. So I went to check on him. Now, he lived out on the outside of town in a trailer park out there kind of by himself. And I went and knocked on the door, and as I did, I saw the guy that ran the park come running towards me. He said, "Are you looking for brother so-and-so?" I said, "Yes, I am." I thought, oh, no. You know what I thought. He said, he's gone. I said, he died? And he goes, no, he eloped. I said, you're kidding me. He said, no, I'm not kidding you. One of the ladies that used to be in his church came by here. She heard where he was, and she came by here and stopped off and asked him if he wanted to get married. And he said, yes. And they ran away and got married. That's a true story. It doesn't matter how young or how old you are. You put the love of Jesus back in your heart. You fall back in love again, and the principles apply no matter what. Okay, in Song of Solomon, chapter 1. Number 1, romance begins in the mind. Romance begins in the mind. Falling back in love with each other begins in the mind. Falling back in love with God begins in the mind. Joshua 1:8, this book of the law shall not depart out of your mouth, but you shall meditate therein day and night, that you may observe to do everything in this book, and that you may have success. God says, if you want to fall back in love with me, it begins in the mind. But if you want to fall back in love with your spouse, it begins in the mind. Romance begins in the mind. How you think is going to determine how you fall back in love with each other. How you fall back in love with each other begins in the mind. So let's start in verse 1. Chapter 1, verse 1, the Song of Songs, which is Solomon's. This is the Shulamite that's speaking. You'll find that in the last chapter of the book, chapter 6, verse 13, the Shulamite. Now, you want to know this. Solomon is the masculine form. Shulam is the feminine form. And they're using the feminine form of Solomon for his girlfriend. They're not married yet. They're going to be married, but who is this girl? Well, she is the Shunammite. When we were studying David, you remember when David was real old and he was about to die and he couldn't stay warm, and so they took the country over to find the prettiest girl they could, and then they brought in the hot water bottle. You remember that? And that was the Shunammite. Well, this is a play on words. Shulamite, Shunammite. This is her. This is the girl, the Shunammite. And she's going to be talking about, now she's been in the palace. She's been around because she was in the palace taking care of David. So she knows what's going on in there. And she knows who Solomon is. And she says, let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth, for your love is better than wine. Because of the fragrance of your good ointments, your name is ointment poured forth. Therefore the virgins love you. Draw me away. She said, I want to think about you. She was thinking about Solomon. Solomon was young. He was probably 20 years old. And she was probably about 20 years old. And she'd been in the palace. And she's thinking about Solomon. This is the first step that God's going to give us in how to fall back in love with each other. We need to think correctly. We need to meditate on our spouse. We need to think correctly. As we think about each other, our love starts to grow. Now this gets really interesting. As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. So as we start to think correctly, as we start to think about our spouse, so we become. So we think about it and we think about it, we think about it until we become that. We start to do that. We think about it until we become that, and then we start to do that. In fact, Psalms chapter 1 says that. Blessed is the man whose delight is in the law of the Lord, and in his law he meditates day and night. He shall be like a tree planted by rivers of water, whose leaf doesn't wither, who bears his fruit into season, and everything he does, and everything he does, and everything he does shall prosper. And it begins by the way we think. And so, think correctly about your spouse. Some of us are thinking about our spouses all right. Now that doesn't help you fall back in love. So what God says is, I want you to think correctly. And here's the Shulamite thinking about Solomon. In verse 2, what's she thinking about in verse 2? Oh, come on. Read verse 2. What's she thinking about? Okay, we're not going to talk about that in church, right? Let him kiss me with the kiss of his mouth, for your love is better than wine. She's thinking about Solomon. She's thinking about falling in love with Solomon. She's been watching Solomon come and go for months and months. And she thinks he's very handsome. And she's falling in love with Solomon. And the way she's doing this is she's thinking about him. This hasn't even happened yet. She's thinking about what it would be like when it did happen. If it happened. How does he kiss? I wonder how he kisses. And she's starting to think about him in a correct form, in a correct way. And God says, I want you to start thinking about your spouse. Now, we've gotten so busy in this nation, literally, for real. We don't have time to think about anything except work. God says, I want that to stop. Now, as we study this, we're going to have to learn how to change a few things. In chapter 1 of Proverbs, same guy wrote the book that wrote this book. In the last two verses or three verses in chapter 1 of Proverbs, it says, your own complacency will kill you, fools. Now this is Proverbs chapter 1, at the very end of Proverbs chapter 1, your own complacency will kill you. That means, complacency means we never change, we just stay the way we are. We're complacent. Yeah, okay. All right. So? Doesn't that drive you crazy when you tell your kids, I want you to stop doing that? And they say, so? His complacency will kill him. No, I'm going to kill him. It'll get him killed. So, God says, okay, your own complacency will kill you. So here's what we've got to do. Starting in chapter 1 of Song of Solomon, we've got to make some changes. We're going to have to change the way we think. We're going to have to change the way we do things. We've become so busy with everything else that we forget to think about each other. And we sure forget to think about God. But we forget to think about each other, and God says, I want you to become uncomplacent, which means that we're going to have to change. Oh, change is so hard. But God says, I want you to change something. Okay, Proverbs 17:22. Put it back up on the screen for me, please. A merry heart doeth good like a medicine, but a broken spirit dries the bones. Well, why do you need medicine? Okay, this side's answering me because I'm looking at them. Why do you need medicine? To get well. What does that mean? We're sick. I couldn't wait to stand up here and tell you guys are sick. As a nation and as a culture, we're sick, we're ill. We need some medicine. And what the medicine is in the church is a merry heart. Rejoice in the Lord. And again, I say rejoice. You can't have a merry heart in church unless you got a merry heart in your home. So God says, this is where we're going to start right here. If we're going to start in the church, we're going to start in this nation, we've got to start at home. And so God says, I want you to have a merry heart because that's the medicine I'm giving you. Well, there are some medicines that taste better than other medicines. This medicine is going to taste better than any of the rest of them. I want you to have a merry heart. That's not too bad of a medicine, is it? So how do you have a merry heart? Well, number one, romance begins in the mind, so we've got to change the way we think. We've got to start taking a little bit of time to think about our spouse. And she does that. She says, let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth, for your love is better than wine. Okay, now I told Jeannie what I was going to be preaching about. She didn't say a word, she just looked at me. Now what that meant, we've been married a long time. What that meant is you better not use me as an illustration. I'm not. Let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth, for your love is better than wine. Because of the fragrance of your good ointment. Your name is ointment poured forth. What's she thinking about there? She's thinking about how he smells. Guys, you better put some foo-foo juice on. Because that could ruin the romance real quick. So she's thinking about how he smells. She's thinking about how he kisses. She's thinking about how he smells. She's thinking about the good things of this man, of Solomon. She's thinking about what she likes about him. We've got to change the way we think about our spouse, because we've come to the point that what we think about is what makes us mad. Oh, he left his socks by the front door again. Oh, he didn't take the $1.50 in change out of his pocket before I washed the jeans. Oh, she did it again. She burned the bacon. Oh, jeez. And those stupid love songs are killing me. No. We're thinking incorrectly. We've got to change. Your own complacency will kill you. It'll kill your marriage. It'll kill the church. It'll kill the nation. I'll try not to raise my voice anymore. Your own complacency will kill you, so we've got to change. We've got to change, and one of the things God says I want you to change is the way you think about your spouse. I want you to, number one, I want you to think about your spouse. First off, we've got to think about our spouse. Number two, we've got to think good things about our spouse. Think good things about them. Everybody sins. We're all sinners. We're all fragile. And we're all creeps. Yeah, we all are. You can think about that. Or you can think about the good stuff. When you think about George Washington, you can think about him as a slaveholder. And that's true. Or you can think about him as the father of this nation. You can think about him as General Washington, who against all odds and against all superiority won the war. And you can think about him as the first president who told him, I don't want to be president. I've lost everything. I don't want to do anything anymore. And they said, you're the only one that can hold the nation together. You can think about him like that. Or you can think about him as wearing dirty socks all the time because he was at Valley Forge. And he never changed underwear. How are you going to think about him? How are you going to think about your spouse? And God says, I want you to think about your spouse, number one. And number two, I want you to think correctly about your spouse, because romance begins in the mind. And she's thinking about how he kisses. She's thinking about how he smells. She's thinking about what a wonderful guy he is and how hard he works. Verse 3, because of the fragrance of your good ointments, your name is ointment poured forth. Therefore the virgins love you. Draw me away. Let's go get married. And her friends say, well, we'll run after you. We'll go with you. She said, the king has brought me into his chambers. That's a really poor translation. The king has brought me into his palace. And they say, her friends say, we'll be glad and rejoice in you. We'll remember your love more than wine. And so think about correctly your spouse. Gary Smalley, who was a marriage counselor of some repute in this nation and hilarious, taught the pastors in pastors' retreats. He taught us every morning to wake up and roll over. And he said, every morning you roll over and you look at your wife and you go, oh, I'm so glad I'm married to you. First thing when you wake up. So I started practicing that years ago. I roll over and I look at Jeannie, I go, oh, and she says, what? It takes a little time, guys. Girls, it's going to take a little time. You're going to have to practice this. This isn't going to come naturally. We're going to have to change something. But as we do, it can be a lot of fun as we grow together, as we learn how to do it the way God wants us to do it. So number one, romance begins in the mind. Number two, compliments are everything. As you think up here, it comes out here. As you think up here, it comes out here. And God says, I want you to change a few things. I want you to start complimenting each other. It's going to do you a world of good. Take a look with me, chapter 1, verses 5 and 6. She said, I'm dark. I'm burned up by the sun. I'm really sunburned. I've been out in the sun so much, I'm just burned black. I'm dark. O daughters of Jerusalem, like the tents of Kedar. Now listen, O daughters of Jerusalem. Why is she talking to the daughters of Jerusalem? She's from Shunem. Why is she talking to the daughters of Jerusalem? We're doing the Bible study, guys. Think. Because where's she been living? Jerusalem. Where? At the palace. She was the hot water bottle. And for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, she ate at the palace. She lived at the palace. So she's talking to the girls. She knows. She's made friends with the girls there. I'm burned up black in the sun, but lovely. I'm lovely because she won the beauty contest and they took her for David. O daughters of Jerusalem, like the tents of Kedar, like the curtains of Solomon, which were black. Don't look at me. Don't look at me. I'm so ugly. Don't look at me. The sun has tanned me, burned me black. My mother's sons were angry with me, and they made me the keeper of the vineyards. But my own vineyard I've not kept. Now, what's she talking about? Well, when King David died, they sent her back home. But her family was embarrassed because she'd been the hot water bottle with King David. And although there was nothing inappropriate that ever took place between them, the Bible says this. Nothing inappropriate ever took place between them. But she had been his hot water bottle, and they sent her back home, and she's so embarrassed. Her family's embarrassed. They don't want to have anything to do with her. And she knows it. And her heart's broken. I'm so ugly. Was she ugly? No. No. And your reference to the pastor's looking better was correct. God, y'all don't catch a joke at all, do you? Look with me at chapter 1, verse 9, 10, and 11. Look what takes place here. Solomon, is going to compliment her. This is very important. Solomon says, I've compared you, my love, to my filly among Pharaoh's chariots. Your cheeks are lovely with ornaments. Your neck looks like chains of gold. We will make you ornaments of gold with studs of silver. You're gorgeous. Now, guys, you need to take this. You need to put this into context here. We're living in the 21st century, and he wasn't. If you tell your wife, honey, you look like a horse, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. And this sermon was for nothing. If you come to your wife and you say, honey, you look like a red Corvette. You look like a Maserati on wheels. Darling, you're the Porsche of my life. She's going to understand that. And that's what Solomon says. He comes to her and he said, you are gorgeous. You have the sleek lines of a Corvette. You look beautiful. Your neck looks like chains of gold and silver. Your eyes are gorgeous. You've got earrings dangling from your ears. Woo! Can I do that from the pulpit? Woo! His compliments. Now you see how he complimented her. You understand. Now I want you to go with me to chapter 2, verse 1, and I want you to see what she says about herself. After he does that, look what she thinks. Chapter 2, verse 1. I'm the rose of Sharon, the lily of the valleys. You can see her twirling around. I'm the rose of Sharon, the lilies of the valleys. Boo, 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 girls. Because his compliments changed her perception completely. She was beautiful. She was gorgeous. But she perceived herself as terribly, terribly ugly. What changed that was what God told Solomon and God tells you to do to your spouse. Compliment your spouse. Now, you can't do that truthfully unless you're thinking it up here. Now, don't lie. If she burns the pancakes and the bacon every morning and you've got smoke in the kitchen, don't walk in and say, boy, that smells good. She's going to think you're making fun of her. You better be truthful. Think it up here. Start to change the way you think about each other. And as you start to change the way you think about each other, it starts to come out your mouth. You don't even realize it, but it comes out your mouth. As you think about God, it starts to come out in your actions. As you think about her or you think about him, it starts to come out in your actions. You start to treat each other better. You start to think about each other better. You start to compliment each other, and then you start acting better. And her perception is completely changed because of his compliments. In fact, in verse 2, the girls she's with say, like a lily among thorns, so is my love among the daughters. You make everybody else look like stickers. That's what they say. This is their friend saying that. As you compliment your wife, other people will compliment your wife. As you compliment your husband, other people will compliment your husband. As you think about your spouse, other people will think about your spouse. That's what God's teaching us here. Compliments are everything. Number 3, verse 7 and 8, share your interests. Verse 7 and 8, tell me, O you whom I love, where do you feed your flock? Where you make it rest at noon? For why should I be as one who veils herself by the flocks of your companions? If you do not know, first among women, follow in the footsteps of the flock and feed your little goats beside the shepherd's tents. Now, what in the world are they talking about? Who was Solomon's daddy? What did David do before he became king? He shepherded. Let me tell you, he never got over that. He was a warrior deluxe. He was the king. He's one of the greatest kings that's ever lived, one of the greatest warriors that's ever lived. But you know what his hobby was? When he just got so sick of being king, and when he got so sick of fighting wars, you know where he went? He had a flock of sheep that he went out there with, and he sat with the sheep and he sang to the sheep just like he used to, because that's how he relaxed. That's what David did. Where did Solomon learn this? Where did Solomon learn about the flocks? Solomon went with his daddy when he was home every morning out to the flocks, and they would sing together and they'd feed the sheep. That's what he did to relax, and that's what God is saying right here. Share your interests. And she's talking about, what are your hobbies? I want to be part of your hobbies. I want to do what you're doing. Husbands, learn what your wife really likes and do some of that. Wives, learn what your husband really likes and do some of that. And then you'll have to compromise on some of it. And folks, I don't care if you share donuts, if you just share something. That's what God is saying right here. She said, oh, Solomon, where do you keep your flocks? I want to be there. I don't want to have to sneak up being veiled lady and watch what you're doing. I want to be a part of your life. Husbands, you need to change some of the things you're doing so your wife can be part of your life. Wives, you need to change some of the things you're doing so your husband can be part of your lives. I hate shopping. I mean, I really hate it. Jeannie will tell you, I hate it. So Jeannie comes along and she said, hey, I'm going out in just a little bit. You want to go? And I said, where are you going? She said, I thought we might go get an ice cream cone. Hey, can I have a hot fudge sundae? Yes, you can. And I'm gone. Learn what the other one likes and share the time together. You're going to have to change a little bit of it. Husbands, you may have to change a little bit. Your wife doesn't always like to go camping and shoot deer. Wives, your husband doesn't always like to go shopping. Y'all are terrible. We're out on vacation. I don't have time for this, but I'm going to do it anyhow. We're out at the Cove, and we were coming back, and we stayed at some town. I don't even know what it was. And I pulled up at the gas station to fill up with gas, and Jeannie looked across. She goes, oh, there's an Ollie's. Good stuff, cheap. She says, did you know they have Bibles on sale in there? I said, Ollie's carries Bibles? She said, yeah, they've got some of the coolest Bibles you've ever seen. I said, okay. So we went over to Ollie's and went to the store. And one of the things I was doing, I was compromising. I've got a lot of Bibles. But she was compromising too. And we walked around in Ollie's. I'd never been in Ollie's. I have now. They've got some pretty cool stuff in there. I mean, I'm not just touting Ollie's, but share your interests. Number 4, and lastly, this is important. Date your mate. Date your mate. In chapter 2, starting in verse 8. So all of this rhymes. Date your mate in verse 8. The voice of my beloved, this is her talking about Solomon. The voice of my beloved, behold, he comes leaping upon the mountains and skipping upon the hills. So you can see, okay, so this is stupid. Here he comes, dun, 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 leaping and skipping. I'm going to have to tell you guys, love makes you do some stupid stuff. But it's true. My beloved is like a gazelle or a young stag. Behold, he stands behind our wall. He's looking through the windows, gazing through the lattice. Let me keep reading. My beloved spoke and said to me, rise up, my love, my fair one, and come away. Lo, winter's past, the rain's over and gone. The flowers appear upon the earth. It's springtime. The time of singing is come, and the voice of the turtle dove is heard in our land. The fig tree puts forth her green figs, the vines with their tender grapes. They give a good smell. Rise up, my love, my fair one, and come away with me. It's springtime. And so what's happening here is he got all excited about his wife. He got all excited about his wife. Springtime is in his heart. I don't know if it's really springtime or not. It probably was. But this is what God is saying. Springtime is in your heart. Come away with me. Let's go have some fun. All work and no play makes Johnny Baptist a really dull guy in his marriage. Date your mate. Have one night or one day a week that you go out on a date. Put springtime back in your heart. Guys, get excited. Ladies, you can help him get excited. We need to be excited about each other, about going out with each other. We need to have springtime back in our hearts. We need to have some fun with each other. Ladies, when you go out on a date, sometimes you need to dress up. The secretary did that morning. You do too. Sometimes you don't need to go anywhere and pay anything. Go to the park. Run around without any makeup. Look crazy. Jump and skip. Swing on the swings. Whatever it takes. Date your mate. Once a week, go out with your mate and have some fun. And that's what God is saying. I want you to fall back in love with each other. And what God's teaching through this, I want you to fall back in love with me. We need to fall back in love with Jesus. We need to have some fun with God. Rejoice in the Lord always. And again, I say rejoice, and rejoicing is fun. We need to have some fun with God.